What's up, guys? Mason the Brock Henderson here, and this is The Flash, Season 6, Episode 7, The Last Temptation of Barry Allen, Part 1. With a title like that, you kind of spoiled it for me. Knowing that this was Part 1 and next episode is Part 2, kind of figured it was going to end that way. So that's my only problem with it, is the fact that they called it Part 1 and Part 2. I wish they would have just titled each episode something differently, so that way there was kind of a surprise of like, holy crap, Barry stayed infected. But I'll admit, when I heard the title of this episode, there was a part of me that was thinking, okay, so what, Ramsey's gonna tempt him? How is that gonna work? Because clearly Ramsey's doing evil, so how on earth is he going to convince good Barry to work with him? So seeing how it actually worked out, I was really impressed with, because again, in my mind, there was no logical way that they could possibly make it make sense for Barry to actually be tempted by Ramsey's plans. But they did, because even though the fight scene between Ramsey and Ralph wasn't that great, the CGI on Ralph has always been really, really bad. And honestly, the CGI in the show isn't one of its strong suits, if I'm being perfectly honest. But yeah, the fight scene was kind of dumb. Ralph's powers, again, I like him better as Ralph than as Elongated Man. But whenever he went into, gave him some of his dark matter and then took it out, there was a part of me that was thinking, okay, so he's not going to die, so what's going to happen here? So whenever they injected Barry's blood into him, I didn't think much of it. I was like, oh, okay, so that's how they keep him around. But then all of a sudden we started hallucinating, and then they revealed what actually happened. I was kind of like, oh, okay, so he's actually inside Barry. That's kind of interesting. And all of the scenes where he's showing Barry the life he could have if he just lets him in. Easily one of the best scenes out of the past couple seasons. I mean, so well done. It was very kind of, I don't know the word I'm looking for. I don't know, creepy isn't really the right word. It was just, something was very ominous about it. There was something that felt off. And very well shot scenes, the sort of twisted way that you really felt like it's everything Barry wants, but there's that hint of something is wrong. I don't know, I love those scenes. They thought they did a great job with it. I've seen scenes like this in other shows, but never in a show especially as cheery as The Flash can be. I don't know, this scene really stuck and landed very, very well. And all the scenes between him and Ramsey, and then even when the Speed Force comes in as his mom and starts trying to talk to him, just very well acted scenes. I really believed everybody in all of the scenes that involved those moments. And I love the story of it too, because it, again, maybe borrowing a bit from Spider-Man and Venom, because this is literally kind of the story that Peter Parker goes through whenever the Venom suit is kind of tempting him towards his bad side, with, the Uncle Ben hero side of him tempting him back towards the light. There's kind of that pull, and I've seen this done before, with the web on one and the Venom, tendril on the other arm, pulling him both sides. I've seen this done before, so it's again, you're borrowing something from Marvel. Why? Why do you keep making these references that make me think of Marvel? Is it just because that's how good Marvel is right now that I'm thinking about it all the time? Or is it because you just had no more ideas, and so you're just like, yeah, we'll just have this Venom type thing, and then, I know, Venom made me think of, let's have Barry Allen tempted, just like Peter Parker was. But even though it did really remind me of that battle that Peter has, it was still well done. It was done in a way that I still enjoyed it. Even though it was on my mind, I still liked their take on this as well, because it is kind of very realistic. I don't think if Ramsey had infected him at any other point before this season, I don't think it would have done anything. I don't think he really would have felt much of anything. But you have him losing his daughter last season, and now this whole season has been about him basically accepting that he's going to die. It is something that weighs on him. And so to get to this point, yeah, there is kind of that feeling I believe he would feel like, I've sacrificed so much. Why do I have to keep being the one that sacrifices? Why do I have to never get what I want? And Yeah, I mean, I fully believe those scenes. And even though it was a little kind of like, oh, okay, yeah, sure, he's completely fine, guys. I know we called this part one, and there's a part two coming up, but he's completely fine. He didn't give in to Ramsay's temptation at all. Everything's all good. I don't know. Did anybody really fall for that? Because I definitely did not. I was just like, yeah, they're just playing this. Even his vague answers, he didn't actually say that he conquered Ramsay's virus or anything. He was just like, yeah, it took a lot, didn't it? But I managed to overcome it. Everything that everything that's worth living for took everything. I'm just like, okay, yeah. So you're answering very vaguely right now. You gave in, and then sure enough, when Iris shows up and he's not being all lovey dovey with her, I'm just like, yeah, here you go. um, so I'm curious to see what they're gonna do with this, though. How they're gonna stop him, because I mean, he is the fastest man alive, and Ramsey so far has been mostly unstoppable with his new powers, and we've seen his minions typically are unstoppable. You know, between that Romero guy and then the doctors that he infected, it seems like there's not much they can do. So they're gonna have to find some answer for how to beat him and how to really fight against that dark matter energy. So I assume they'll find a way. I assume they'll find the answer for it. But I'm looking forward to seeing that. The other few things in this, first of all, we do see Nash. He shows up in the end and he opens up the whatever door that we've seen. I do find it a little weird that I don't know. There is something weird to me. Maybe the Flash is technically the first episode. I'll have to actually look and see how these like came out and in what order they came out, because maybe the Flash, like the next episode that I'm about to watch, came out before like Supergirl and Batwoman and Arrow. So maybe we'll see that first. Whatever happens that he references whenever he's at the door and he's like, "You saved me." Maybe that actually came before, but I don't know. I'll have to look that up. Um, but yeah, I mean, it sort of shows, okay, so this is how he found that door, and now I guess in the next episode we'll see what he's talking about when he says that he was saved by Marnovu. But clearly he has a vendetta against him, but I still don't really know what's going on there. Uh, Killer Frost, I don't really know what's going on here, because Ralph comes in and she seems a little shaken up, but nothing like crazy bad is going on, and then she turns back into Caitlin, who then has the idea to put Barry's blood into him. But then when Barry shows up and he's like seizing and he's got a bad fever, all of a sudden Frost starts to hyperventilate. I don't really understand. She has like pictures of Ralph there, but I'm just like, okay. She didn't seem to show any of this when Ralph was on the table, and now she's picturing Ralph being on the table when Barry's on the table. It just seems kind of weird that all of a sudden she's like, "Oh, I can't handle this. I can't handle the." I don't know. It seems like it's adding an extra layer that's not really needed right now, because I feel like the Barry stuff was so interesting that you didn't really need to add an extra little underlying storyline of Frost dealing with, I guess, people she cares about being in danger. I don't know. Maybe they'll talk about it a bit more in this next episode, but I thought it was kind of pointless for this one. And then the other story that I also felt was pointless, but I understand it's kind of filling up the runtime, is Iris with Allegra and Camilla. And their little story, they're looking into Allegra's cousin and how she was able to basically go from being in a coma to working as a supervillain. And I don't know, it's just not really that interesting. Iris is dealing with Barry about to sacrifice himself, and whether or not she should write the article. I guess trying to distract herself with another story so she doesn't have to think about it. I don't know. It just, again, it felt like filler, but I kind of understand it probably is, because even though I would have loved to see more of these scenes of Ramsey tempting Barry, I get the fact that they probably wanted to have a little bit more on top of that. So it is what it is. I wasn't a big fan of those scenes, but they weren't bad or anything. Nothing really stupid about it. Although it did, again, it sort of made me think, because Allegra was like, do you think maybe your husband should talk to his friend? And then I was just like, oh no, Camilla knows. And it does make me realize these CW shows really like to play loose with the superhero giving away their secret identity, you know? And I don't know, I just felt like that was always something that was sort of fun about older superhero shows, more animated superhero shows. But that feeling of trying to live two lives and trying to keep your secret, trying to come up with clever reasons why they can't find out or how you get around telling them. I don't know. I kind of miss that because I feel like all of these shows right now on the CW are just very much like, oh, hey, you're a new friend. 3 episodes from now, you're going to find out my secret identity. And I don't know. Even the villains, it feels like, finds out. I think about mainly Batman. How many times did the villains of Batman find out his secret identity? Never. How many times did the villains find out Peter Parker's secret identity? Almost never. So it just feels like the fact that so many villains find out who all of these characters are, and so many, friends just come in, and then within a few episodes they're finding out who the secret identity is, and it just, I don't know, it feels like there's no reason to have a secret identity almost anymore because so many people find out and so many people know. What's the point of having a secret identity in the first place? So, that's just a minor gripe of mine. But anyways, on to the next episode. See you there. And now for part 2. I really liked how they handled this, just because, I don't know, it did play with my expectations a little bit. I really thought it was just going to be something like, what they seemed to be showing, where Cisco made this little gun thing that was going to destroy the dark matter inside of Ramsey, and then that was kind of going to be what ended up working, is just basically taking the dark matter out of everything. But I like the fact that it wasn't quite that, that it was Barry actually fighting against it, giving little clues to the team so they could fight back against Ramsey, but also kind of infecting Ramsey a little bit with himself. That way he was able to manipulate Ramsey in a couple ways near the end. So I like how they handled that, just all the build up, how clever they were in showing little bits and pieces, little hints. Because honestly, I mean, when he first said, like when Ramsey first said to Cisco, I knew I picked the right guy, there was kind of that little clue in my head that just popped in. I'm like, wait a minute, that's something Barry said. Is Barry still in there somewhere? Like, is he somehow infecting Ramsey? So whenever they started to show more and more that might be what's happening, I was like, okay, that's pretty clever how they sort of played with that a little bit and sort of led us along, and I guess gave us, the audience, enough to figure it out before the characters themselves had figured it out. On top of that, the fact that he didn't kill Iris, didn't kill Cisco, it was definitely there the whole time. So I like how they did all of that. The scenes with Cecile and Allegra, or not Allegra, Camila was in there with her. Very surprising to see them do basically a zombie horror scene. I mean, obviously these things are very Walking Dead zombie-ish, with the snarling and like that whole thing, the way they walk, and it was very zombie-ish, So there was already that feeling, but then all of a sudden they take out all the lights, they take out all the sound. You just hear like the noises of these, they're not zombies or walkers, which I call them blood brothers and sisters. Just seems like it's too much of a mouthful. Possessed. I'm just going to call them possessed. But you just hear the noises of these possessed people just walking around and all of a sudden appearing. And you can hear when one's about to come because you hear Cecile's powers working, and like, oh, I hear the fear, or I feel the fear coming from one. But it was just the way they set it up. I'm like, wait a minute. Is this going to be like basically a horror scene here? And sure enough, it was, with like them running by the window and all of a sudden one comes across and a little jump scare. And then you walk around the corner, everything's dark. There's like a blinking red light in the background. I'm like, okay, this is spooky. This is very spooky. I did not expect to see a horror scene done in The Flash, but here we are. But yeah, I mean, all of the characters played their parts. Those two were probably the least involved just because they were just getting out of the building alive, which, I mean, they still would have been fine even if they got possessed, because that whole wave of radiation or whatever, UV, whatever you want to call it, it still would have uninfected them if they had gotten infected. So I guess those scenes were kind of pointless when you think about it that much, but still very intense for both of them. But Caitlin Killer Frost's story in this, I don't know, it kind of felt weird for Killer Frost to all of a sudden just have these doubts about herself and about her ability to help. I don't know. It feels like it sort of came out of nowhere. Maybe this has been built up a little bit and I've just missed it. But this storyline felt kind of unnecessary. Again, we had so many good scenes that I feel like you didn't need to have this extra story thrown in where she all of a sudden has to have a moment where she's freaking out. She's like, I can't do this. So I don't really get it. I don't really understand that story and why it popped up now of all times. Um, what else? What else? Obviously, Cisco and Iris both dealing with what's about to happen in their own ways. Because Cisco basically looking at this whole thing like, okay, we were already going to lose Barry, so this is no different. Which is why he didn't really care if the photon emitter thing he built did end up killing Barry, because he's like, well, he was already going to be gone anyway. Whereas Iris, of course, still had hope that she could save him, so she wanted to still try to plead, and hopefully Barry was somewhere still in there. So it was interesting to see the two sides, and then of course coming together and realizing, you know, there is still a way, but also, I guess, from Cisco's point of view, still having that feeling of he needs to step up and be ready to take the reins and be willing to trust that he can make the right decisions. But Allegra, her involvement, I'm okay with it so far. I'm still not like fully on board for whatever's going on. And honestly, the fact that they didn't look into Esperanza anymore, or the people that basically took her anymore in this episode, really made their story in the last episode feel so filler. Because I thought it was going to be kind of a half and half where they were going to keep looking into the whoever blew up this guy's car in the last episode or at the end of it. But they didn't even talk about it in this episode. It was all focused on stopping Ramsey. I'm just like, okay, so really that was just a huge filler plot that's going to come up later this season, and we're supposed to forget about it for now. Got it. But having her be the one to save the day by shooting her UV powers, I like it. She's coming along pretty well as a character so far. I don't mind having her a part of the team. I still think it was kind of dumb how they sort of just had Nash spoil Barry's the Flash to her, but also that connection that she and Nash have. He feels some connection to her from probably his Earth that I assume we'll figure out at some point. But as far as Nash is concerned, we do finally see why he claims that Mar-Novu saved him in this episode. And I gotta admit, it is kind of dumb. um, Only because I'm looking at this, he's such a skeptical person, right? He's somebody that he doesn't just believe, everything that he's been told, or he doesn't instantly think, oh yes, some myth is being told to me. Let me look into this myself. So the fact that Team Flash is the one that saved the day, saved him from these possessed people that were attacking him, and his first thought is, oh, Mar-Novu saved me. Yes. Maybe it's an act. Maybe he's acting this way so he can get close to Mar-Novu to see his plan and who he is, since obviously he wasn't letting him in before. But it really does sort of make me feel like Mar-Novu is a fraud. Because he's been saying this whole time that he's just a fraud, he's a false god, all of this stuff. And then we see Team Flash is actually the one that saved him in this instance, not Novu. So it does sort of lean toward the theory that maybe Novu is a fraud. Maybe he isn't the good guy that we're all believing him to be. Because in this instance, he's not the one that saved Nash, but he's taking credit for it, and he's just like, you know what to do. The answer's inside you. And now I'm wondering, is it just whatever order he pressed, it was just going to open up anyway? But Novu's making him think, oh no, because I'm giving you this information. I've bestowed upon you as your god. I've given you the power. Is that what's going on here? Because if so, that's kind of interesting. But also, again, as far as Nash's character, it doesn't really fit with him. So I would see it a lot more if he claimed, oh yes, I believe in you now. I believe you saved me. Just so he could get into his good graces and ultimately backstab him and say, ha, I knew you're just a false god this whole time. So I guess we'll see what they decide to do with that, but at least now I know why he's been saying, oh, you saved me. So, but yeah. I mean, all in all, 2 very good episodes. Making it a part 1 and part 2, I can see the point of it now, even though it did sort of spoil Barry turning into Dark Flash at the end of last episode. I like the fact that it wasn't just he gave into the dark side. There was kind of a reason for it. He let Ramsey in so that way he could also infect him a little bit too and start to show him his doubts so he could hit back at the end of it all. So yeah, overall very good story, and of course only one more show to get through before we are in the crisis. Really excited. Honestly, when I started to get back into these shows and like the CW shows mainly, this was definitely something I was looking forward to. You know, I wasn't excited to watch Batwoman. I wasn't excited really to watch Supergirl, even Arrow, even though it's been pretty solid this season. I wasn't really looking forward to get back into that either. So all of these shows have been building up to this moment, you know, and I've heard some rumors about some people who show up. I don't know any of the story of it though, so I'm just very excited to see what is going to happen. How does this all come to an end? It's kind of the end of Arrow as well in a way because there's only 2 episodes after it. So it really does feel like this is when they first started Arrow, you know, that's been building up, building up, building up, and now here we are at the crisis. And it's something that, you know, I feel like the DC movies have really skipped out on. You know, the original feel of what Marvel did, you know, introducing Iron Man and then, you know, the Hulk and then Iron Man 2, then Thor, Captain America, and then led to the Avengers. And then all of that, they kept building and building, and that built up to Endgame. You know, all of that felt like such a work of passion. And, you know, these series, I don't think they had all of this in mind necessarily. I don't think they imagined it would turn into multiple series with, you know, on different Earths and different universes and stuff like that. I don't think they imagined it would get this big, but it still feels like this crisis is kind of the climax of all of the CW DC universe. So it does, I will say it does sort of make me feel like after this, it'll be hard for me to really feel excited. And again, it's kind of why my Batwoman reviews, not really sure if I want to go back to that show after the crisis because it's so bad. That this is really the only reason I've been watching it is because I thought it would tie into the crisis somehow, which it hasn't. It's also pissed me off. But anyways, I've already talked about it enough on those reviews. But yeah, very excited. So that's it for me. Let me know what you guys think down in the comment section below. What were your thoughts on these 2 episodes? Let me know. We can talk about and discuss all that good stuff. Leave a like and subscribe for future Flash reviews, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace out.